Hey guys, Josh here. Today we are going to be reviewing the first half of the F1 2015 season. Let's get straight into it then, talking about Mercedes, and it's been another dominant year for them, leading both the teams and drivers standings. Not quite as dominant as they were in 2014, but it's been a very solid year. They clearly have not only the best car but certainly the best engine, and although the gap has been closed on them, through Ferrari and possibly even you could argue Williams, Mercedes have just maintained the composure and have really slipped up. There of course has been a few hiccups, like at the end of the Monaco Grand Prix, and of course Hungary as well did not go their way. But apart from that, Mercedes have pretty much dominated this season, and it's looking very unlikely that they're going to be having anybody stop them taking their second Constructors' Championship in a row. Like I mentioned before, they're not quite as dominant as last season. They are at times vulnerable now, especially off the start line, as we've seen from the previous two Grand Prix. If they want to make sure that they're going to be winning as many races in the second half, they really do have to get their starts nailed down, because starts are more crucial than ever before. With it being so hard to overtake, it's so crucial to get ahead on the opening lap, and that's something Mercedes have failed to do in the previous two races, and it did of course cost them highly in Hungary. In terms of the whole Hamilton versus Rosberg feud, it's definitely died down for 2015. They really do seem to be able to, compete against each other a bit more fairly than they did last season, and a bit more civil, I guess would be the word to describe their relationship this season. Hamilton's been very much ahead of Rosberg, and even when Rosberg's been beaten quite heavily by Hamilton, he's always maintained his smile, I've noticed, and he's been very professional, I think, this season, and I've been really pleased with Rosberg's whole attitude, really. Maybe a bit too pleased with it, really. I mean, sometimes he's a bit too pleased to be beaten by Hamilton, but certainly I'm sure underneath he's been very angry, very frustrated, because he's lost his single lap advantage that he had to Hamilton last season for this season. It really does seem to have the tables have been turned really in qualifying. Hamilton is absolutely dominating it, 9-1 to Lewis Hamilton. Of course, that's 9 pole positions as well. Rosberg just getting 1 pole position, and then for the race it's been 7-3 to Hamilton, and a massive open goal missed for Nico Rosberg in Hungary. That was a big opportunity for him to leap ahead of Hamilton in the drivers' standings, and of course going into the summer break that would have been massive for him, but just hasn't transpired that way. Really unlucky. The way things played out at Hungary as well just were not in Rosberg's favour. I mean, to have Hamilton make 2 massive errors and get a penalty and still finish ahead of Rosberg, who only really made 1 error, is a massive blow for Rosberg. He's not going to get many more chances like this. In fact, I very much doubt Hamilton's going to have another race like that in the second half of the season. Possibly even maybe one race where he has a DNF, possibly through driver error or through car failure, and that's going to be probably Rosberg's only chance, really, because he just hasn't been able to match Hamilton this season, but he's still done his job. He's a solid number 2 driver. He's done a slightly better job, I think, for than Kimi to kind of, I guess, he's not really supporting Hamilton either in that kind of number 2 role, but he's not really taking many points off Hamilton. Had Rosberg and Hamilton been a bit closer this season, possibly we could have even seen Vettel being a lot closer to Mercedes, and possibly even Ferrari. So I guess, Rosberg's done his decent job. That pace deficit is always going to be there. I think it's a bit tough, really, to compare him to Hamilton, considering, in my eyes, Hamilton's, of course, in the top 3 drivers with Vettel and Alonso, and Rosberg's probably in the kind of second, or maybe even third tier of F1 drivers, in my opinion. So I'd have to give Rosberg's season a B-. It's kind of hard to rank him, of course, when we're rating him against one of the finest drivers of the 21st century. At the same time, Hamilton has not had the perfect season, although in my opinion it's been much better than 2014, which is why I have to give him an A. Arguably the best driver, but I think Hungary was probably the blot on the record, and that's why I don't think he's quite the best driver this season, but has certainly done a great job, and I really can't see anyone else winning the World Championship apart from Lewis Hamilton, but maybe that's a topic for another video. But yeah, Hamilton, then, I've got to give him a solid A, Rosberg a B-, and Mercedes as a team been very positive, and I have to give them an A. A slight, hiccups in kind of Monaco and possibly Hungary as well, with a couple of strategy calls as well along the way, have not been probably the best, but I think they managed the drivers a lot better this season than they did last season, and overall I think Mercedes have been very, dominant this season, I think, overall. Despite this threat from Ferrari, I think at certain tracks it's probably a bit overhyped, and maybe from practice. Mercedes really controlled the season. I think they'll be fully deserved of their second World Championship in a row. Let's move on then to talk about Ferrari. Of course, their driver Sebastian Vettel and Kimi Räikkönen having a very a tale of two sides, really. I think a tale of two mixed fortunes, basically, for the Ferrari drivers. Sebastian Vettel coming into a new team and having an absolute fantastic year. It's been so much better than I think many people expected. Not in the fact that Vettel's consistently beating Räikkönen. I think most people did expect that, but just the way that Ferrari have improved so much is, really outstanding. Massive credit to James Allison, and massive credit to the people who develop and have certainly improved the Ferrari engine from this year to, compared to last year to this year. Massive leap forward in that department, and I think that's definitely where Ferrari owe the success to. Of course, Vettel's had a big part to play in that as well. He's done the stuff on track, but the off-track side of Ferrari has been absolutely magnificent this year. Ferrari have been brilliant. They've barely put a foot wrong on the strategy calls. A few but dodgy pit stops, and I guess with Räikkönen as well, they've taken a few risks, which they kind of seem to acknowledge that they're probably not going to work, but they do still take them just because, it's Räikkönen, he's the number 2 driver. Vettel's a priority, and I guess, one way that's a bit tight on Räikkönen, and he hasn't been able to show his true pace, but really he has been a good, I'd say, 3/10 off, Vettel in most races. It's a similar gap, I believe, probably a bit bigger gap than it is to Rosberg and Hamilton. I think the Räikkönen to Vettel gap is slightly bigger than that. Certain tracks in the second half of the year, could Räikkönen possibly beat Vettel? Perhaps, but Räikkönen's going to need a win to save his Formula 1 career, in my opinion. Otherwise, I do think he's going to be on the way out. Vettel, of course, wants to keep him just because, Vettel knows he can beat him. It's a very tactical move from Vettel. And I guess if Ferrari were to retain him, Räikkönen's a solid number 2 who I don't believe this season is probably taking, points off Vettel in probably only about, 2 races. So, he's a great number 2 driver in that respect. But I guess if Ferrari want 2 drivers that are going to be pushing both of the Mercedes, then you're going to need someone like Bottas or possibly Nico Hülkenberg. But that's a topic for another video, who could replace Räikkönen if he goes. In terms of a score then for Kimi Räikkönen, it's not been a good season at all. He's probably better than last season, but still, not the best. I'm going to have to give him a C+. And that's, being nice, I guess. You could even be more harsher than that. Vettel, for me, has been the driver of the season. He gets an A+. Let's talk about Williams then, currently lying 3rd in the Constructors. It's been an interesting season for Williams after such a strong 2014. Many people thought that they closed the gap to Mercedes this season, but it certainly has not transpired that way. The gaps to Mercedes and Williams has certainly probably, got a bit bigger probably. I mean, certain tracks, they're probably similar pace to where they were last season, but certain tracks, Monaco, Hungary, their pace just wasn't there, and this is one of the major flaws with this year's Williams. It's only good at certain tracks, and it's really, really bad. Like, it's the 4th or 5th worst car out there at certain tracks, and that's not good enough. If they want to be sustaining a championship challenge, they're never going to be able to do that with this current car kind of setup where it only works to certain tracks. And also the fact that their strategy calls have been a bit off at certain races, certainly when they're battling against Mercedes in that one race, of course, in Britain, where they probably did throw away a podium. Definitely, I think they probably would never beat the Mercedes even if they'd had a good strategy call, but they certainly should have challenged them a lot more in the dry stint of the race anyway. That's another thing, the car really does not work well in the wet either, which is a major flaw. Like I said before, Williams are never going to win a world championship at this rate unless they sort their car out and make sure it's actually good at all the tracks, not just some of the tracks. In terms of Bottas versus Massa for me has been one of the surprises of the season. He's been absolutely brilliant. I'm going to give him a solid A- because he's been, in my opinion, one of the most improved drivers off last season, and is possibly, back to his 2008 form. He's carried on the strong form from the last few races of 2014. He's carried that into 2015. Absolutely brilliant, in my opinion. He's actually outqualified Bottas 6-4 this season. Bottas has slightly outraced him 5-4, but Massa's been on par with Bottas. This is the guy that they're tipping to go to Ferrari. This is the guy many people are tipping to be a future world champion, and Felipe Massa is sticking right with him. Of course, the man Ferrari sacked, so you do have to raise questions. If Bottas went to Ferrari, would he just be another Massa? Are they making a mistake signing Bottas? Should they just keep Räikkönen? Should they even re-sign Massa? But I think Massa's very, very happy at Williams, and I really could not see that. There's no way Ferrari would admit him. That's basically admitting a mistake to fire Massa. But yeah, Master's just a new home, equal machinery as well to Bottas. I'm not convinced he had that at Ferrari, and certainly did not have equal treatment that Alonso was getting. So, you know, really happy to see Master rejuvenated back to his 2008 form. Bottas has been, you know, still really good. I mean, I know I'm saying all these things like Massa is much better than Bottas, but, you know, Bottas has still had that slight edge over Massa. But if he wants that Ferrari seat, he's really got to eke out a bigger gap to Massa over these next few races. And I think they're certainly going to be crucial for, you know, not just his championship position at the end of the year, but certainly who he's going to be driving with next season. Even if he does stay at Williams, I think next season he could still be really strong. And yeah, I'm just hoping for a really solid second half for Williams. They should be even stronger. I really do hope that either Massa or Bottas could either sneak a win. So, you know, Bottas, I'm going to have to give him an A- as well. You know, him and Massa have been very evenly matched. I think it'd be unfair to rate one of them higher than the other. I guess you could say Bottas is only in his third season, so possibly he deserves higher, but that's what I'm going to go with anyway. You guys can leave your own down in the comment section below, by the way. So yeah, I think the grade for Williams, I probably have to say B+. They haven't been able to keep up with Mercedes, but I guess that's understandable with their budget. But just, I'm not happy with the setup of the car. I don't get why it's so good at certain tracks and not so good at others. It's not just down to the engine, because, you know, they're down on the likes of Force India and Lotus, who have the same engine at tracks like, you know, Monaco and possibly even, not to a certain extent, Hungary, but certainly for Monaco and in the wet, they're really not that strong. They must improve that for 2016, and I really hope they do. So I think I'd have to give him a B+, you know, and a few poor strategy calls along the way as well. They're not one to take risks, which is a big shame, really, because I really do want to see Williams on the top step of the podium, of course, for the first time since 2012. Let's move on to the next team then, Red Bull Racing, currently lying 4th in the standings. Just a side note about Red Bull, this is going to be the first time Ferrari have finished ahead of them since 2008 in the constructors standings, so there's a statistic for you. Their drivers, of course, Ricciardo and Fiat, have actually been very, very evenly matched. Ricciardo 6-4 in qualifying, but it's Fiat 5-4 in the race, rather in the races so far this season. So Fiat's actually done a really, really solid job. He's got the best result so far of the season of both of them. In second place, of course, Ricciardo also won podium, of course, both of them coming in Hungary. A great race for Red Bull. Possibly should have taken the win, but I think they're going to be very happy with second and third. Can they catch Williams? It's going to be very tough for them. Their next big target, of course, is going to be at Singapore. Possibly could definitely be seeing them on the podium again. The Red Bull Aero squad have, as I like to call them, have done a fantastic job again this season. It's a pretty decent car. It's just kind of the brakes and the whole Renault engine package is really not working out for them. The way they've handled the whole Renault, you know, engine lack of performance anyway, has not been the best. There's been a big, you know, kind of public spat between the two firms, which is really not good for sponsorship terms and just kind of the whole image of the whole team. I've definitely got to mark them down for that. In terms of their drivers, you know, they've done a really solid job. Fiat's taken it to Ricciardo this season after a pretty poor start to the season for the Russian. Many people were already calling for his head around kind of Bahrain time, but after then, he really just seemed to click with the car. He's really got into his rhythm now, and he's really taking it to Ricciardo. Those two have been very evenly matched, and considering Fiat doesn't have nearly as as much experience as Ricciardo, I've got to actually rank them the same, and I'm both going to give them a B. There's certain areas they could certainly improve on, and after Ricciardo was the star of 2014, he certainly hasn't shown that, you know, quite as much in 2015. It was great to see him going all out in Hungary. I really hope more drivers do that, even if it did lead to that you know, mistake with Rosberg, or that kind of collision. I don't think that was Ricciardo's fault. It wasn't at Rosberg's either. It was just one big racing incident. But hey, he went for it. Had that move, you know, been pulled off cleanly, then I do think Ricciardo could have possibly even challenged for the win. And that would be a good one at seeing him hunt down Vettel. I do believe both of these guys are staying at Red Bull as well for next season. I can't see that changing. Ricciardo has signed a long-term deal with them, and with them possibly getting Mercedes engines, it could be a really solid 2016 for them. As for the rest of the season, you know, possibly they're just going to be seeing out the rest of the year with Renault. They do have a contract for next year with Renault, but of course that could be easily broken. You know, considering all the off-track pressures they have, the drivers have done a really, really solid job. So, you know, full credit to them, even though they're being beaten by the Toro Rosso drivers at certain points. And I guess you could argue the Red Bull, you know, chassis is not quite matched that of the Toro Rosso at certain tracks. So I'm going to have to give the team a B-, just for the handling of the Renault kind of Red Bull saga has been really poor as well. So that's what I'm going to give them for that. Let's move on to the final team then for this episode, and then we'll have a part 2 discussing the next 5 teams. And of course, currently 5th in the standings, it's Force India. Their highest constructors standing position, of course, currently is 6th place, so they're on for their best result. As a Force India fan, it's been a mega season, really. Certainly quite a few ups and downs, really, and certainly between the drivers as well, Perez and Nico Hülkenberg. In qualifying, it's been very one-sided. Hülkenberg out-qualifying Perez 8-2. But Perez in the race, of course, where it counts, where you score the points, it's been 6-4 to Sergio Perez. That's mainly down to his fantastic early season form. Although, you know, apart from Australia, of course, that was a horrendous race for Perez. But after that, Malaysia, China, Bahrain, Spain, and of course Monaco, undoubtedly Perez's best, race of the season. Racing to a 7th, and of course 6th on the grid as well. That was a fantastic weekend for Sergio Perez. And then we've kind of had Nico Hülkenberg, basically post Monaco, picking up some fantastic results in the B-Spec car. Main reason why, of course, Hülkenberg's ahead in the standings is, of course, he came good when the B-Spec car was around, of course, meaning he could get higher positions. Perez, of course, couldn't do that with the weaker car, even though he was ahead of Hülkenberg at that point. So that's my reasoning to suggest they've been fairly evenly matched this season, although Hülkenberg has certainly probably had the slight edge over him. If Hülkenberg wants that top Ferrari seat, he's got to put Perez away in the second half of the year, and I don't think he's really currently doing that. I mean, if he carries on this form in the last 2 or 3 races, then he certainly is, but as a first half of the season in general, he really hasn't done that overall, so he needs to get that fixed if he does want that Ferrari seat. I think we're going to be seeing Perez at Force India again for a 3rd season in 2016, and I think that's fully deserved as well. He'll be looking forward to the Mexican Grand Prix as well, and I think this B-Spec Force India is just going to get better and better, considering this is a team that missed a lot of pre-season testing, has the 8th largest budget on the grid, of course, only ahead of Sauber and Manor, and they're sitting in 5th place in the constructor standings with 2 of the drivers doing a fantastic job. I've got to give this team an A-, really, in my opinion. They've been fantastic. They've been one of the best teams of the season, while other teams have been struggling with various issues. And of course, the head of Lotus as well, who have a much bigger budget, and of course, a driver who has scored many podiums in 2012 to 2013. So I think Force India have done a really solid job. And like I said, with the B-Spec car, they're going to be so much stronger in the second half of the year. I do actually reckon they're going to be getting a podium in the second half of the year. If we have a kind of crazy race, they could, definitely, I think, take advantage of a Mercedes, a Ferrari, or possibly even a Williams failing and possibly get a podium. But I think certainly, I guess more realistically, you could say 5th and 6th in races is very possible. And I think 5th in the championship, it's going to be very close between Force India and McLaren, who I do believe are going to be improving quite a bit in the second half of the year. So it's so important for Force India to make sure they capitalise on races like Hungary and get points. They could have got a podium there had they not had those failures, which basically blighted them all weekend. So they really do basically need to make sure none of these failures happen again. Make sure the reliability is solid with the B-Spec car. Make sure it wasn't anything to do with the front wing. Those the new front wing on the B-Spec car possibly causing those incidents in Hungary. I really do hope they get them sorted, because if they can, then there's no reason why they can't get 5th in the constructor standings, of course, which would be a new personal best for Force India. I really do hope we see that. But anyway, in terms of the drivers then, I think Hülkenberg's been really good in these last few races. A solid B+. If he continues to perform like he did in the last few races, then he could certainly be promoted, I think, to at least an A come the end of the season. Sergio Perez has had a very solid season as well. I'm going to give him a B. Not quite as strong as Hülkenberg, but certainly in those first few races he was absolutely brilliant. And at the end of the day, he's outraced Nico Hülkenberg slightly more, despite both of them, I guess, having a bit of bad luck, really. I think on both sides, it's unfair to say one of them had more bad luck than the other, because I think it's been pretty equal in terms of that anyway. So that's my review then of the first half of the season for the top 5 teams in the driver's standings. I'll be reviewing the next, or rather bottom 5 teams in the standings, which of course is Lotus, Toro Rosso, Sauber, and Manor. And somebody else, and McLaren, of course. It's so easy to forget that they're actually in the bottom 5 in the standings. But anyway, you guys can leave your little mini reviews of the first 5 teams in the constructor standings down in the comment section below. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video then, and I'll see you guys for part 2 very soon. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.